Cari Farver, at 37 years old, was the type of person who immediately caught your attention when she entered a room. With an infectious laugh and a warm, welcoming smile, she had a way of lighting up any space. As her friend Amy Long later put it, you couldn't help but notice her. Cari was a skilled computer programmer, proficient in multiple programming languages, and had an associate's degree from Iowa Western Community College. By 2012, she had secured her dream job as a programmer analyst at West Corporation in Omaha. Living in Macedonia, Iowa, a small town with just 400 residents, Cari commuted an hour each way to her job. However, Cari's greatest source of pride was her 4-year-old son, Maxwell. In 2012, she made it a point to attend his sports events and band concerts, always putting her role as a devoted mother first. Although Cari had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder in her late 22nd, by 2012, she had found stability through medication and was thriving. She had 3 tattoos that reflected her personality and life: an Aztec sun on her upper back, a yin-yang symbol and Chinese character on her thigh, and a Chinese symbol on her left foot that represented Mother. Meanwhile, in the spring of 2012, Dave Kruer, a 5-year-old auto mechanic, was attempting to rebuild his life. He had recently separated from his long-term girlfriend, Amy Flora, with whom he shared 2 children. After moving to Omaha and securing a job managing an auto repair shop, Dave Kruer, a 5-year-old mechanic, was looking to start fresh. Having recently ended a long-term relationship, he knew exactly what he wanted, no strings attached. He joined the dating site Plenty of Fish, where he made his intentions clear to the women he met he wasn't interested in anything serious. That spring, he began seeing a woman he met online, Shauna Elizabeth Golia, known as Liz. Liz, a 7-year-old single mother of 2, ran her own house cleaning business. Right from the start, Dave made it clear to Liz that he was dating other women and wasn't seeking commitment. While Liz agreed to the casual arrangement, she secretly hoped for something more permanent. She became possessive, often calling and texting Dave and growing jealous of his other relationships. In October 2012, Dave had a chance encounter at his shop with a woman who would catch his eye. She came in needing work done on her Ford Explorer, and Dave immediately noticed her. She was beautiful, and there was an undeniable spark between them. However, being at work, he didn't feel it was the right time to make a move. Weeks later, fate intervened when he came across the same woman on Plenty of Fish. Her name was Cari Farver. Dave reached out to Cari, and their first date took place on October 29th, 2012, at a restaurant in Omaha. Dave later recalled feeling an immediate connection with her, and they were both clearly captivated by each other. During the date, Liz, his casual girlfriend, repeatedly called and texted him. Despite the interruptions, Dave made it clear to Cari that he was interested in her. After dinner, they went back to Dave's apartment. But when they arrived, Liz appeared at the door, saying she needed to retrieve some of her belongings. As the 2 women passed each other in the hallway, their brief encounter lasted no more than 10 seconds. While Cari seemed unfazed by the meeting, for Liz, that moment sealed Cari Farver's fate in her mind. In the weeks that followed, Cari and Dave continued to meet. Cari worked nearby, and their regular meetings created a bond. Neither of them was actively seeking a serious relationship, but there was undeniable potential between them. Dave, who had initially sworn off commitment, began to reconsider his stance. He felt there was something different about Cari, something that suggested a possibility of a long-term future. However, things took a darker turn on November 9th and 10th, when Cari's Ford Explorer was vandalized in Macedonia. Phone records later revealed that Liz had made 6 calls to Cari's residence, using times 67 to block her caller ID. By November 12th, Cari asked Dave if she could stay at his apartment for the week, signaling a further deepening of their connection. Cari had a big project at work and didn't want to endure the long commute each day, so she decided to stay at Dave's apartment for the week. Dave agreed, and Cari arranged for her 4-year-old son, Max, to stay with her mother, Nancy Rainey, during that time. On the morning of November 13th, 2012, around 7 a.m., Dave kissed Cari goodbye as he left for work. Cari was awake, using her laptop, preparing for her day at West Corporation. That would be the last time anyone saw Cari Farver alive. Later that morning, around 11 a.m., Dave received a strange text message from Cari's phone. The message asked if they should move in together. Dave was taken aback. He and Cari had only been dating for 2 weeks. He politely responded, declining the idea. Almost immediately, another text came through. "Fine. I hate you. I'm dating someone else. I don't ever want to see you again." Dave was stunned. The tone of the message had shifted dramatically in a very short time. When Dave returned home from work that evening, he found that all of Cari's belongings were gone from his apartment. Everything, her clothes, laptop, and personal items had vanished, as if she had never been there. 2 days later, on November 15th, Cari's employer at West Corporation received a text from her phone stating that she was quitting her job. The message also recommended Shana Golia, Liz's full name, as a replacement. Later that same day, Liz Golia applied for Cari's position. In the days that followed, the messages sent from Cari's phone became increasingly strange and troubling. The messages that began arriving on Dave's phone were chillingly specific, filled with details about his actions and appearance. One text asked, "How's that coffee taste?" while he sat in a diner. The tone of the messages grew darker and more disturbing, with one declaring, "My favorite thing to do is stand outside and stare at you. I hate you so much that I want to drive in your heart." It was clear that whoever was sending them had been closely watching Dave, and the intensity of the messages felt increasingly threatening. On November 16th, 2012, Nancy Rainey, Cari's mother, reported her daughter missing to the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Nancy knew something was terribly wrong. This was not like Cari. She explained that Cari had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but had been stable on medication for years. Cari was not the type to just walk away from her son, her job, or her life. However, the police dismissed Nancy's concerns almost immediately. They believed Cari had simply stopped taking her medication and had voluntarily disappeared, which they claimed was a common occurrence with people who had bipolar disorder. But Nancy was unconvinced. She knew her daughter, and the texts she had been receiving from Cari's phone were completely out of character. Cari was always punctuation conscious, but these messages were filled with grammatical errors, anger, and hostility traits that were never a part of her personality. Nancy continued to reach out, pleading via text for Cari to call her so she could hear her voice. But the calls never came. Meanwhile, Max, who had just turned 15, tried to connect with his mother through Facebook, asking 3 questions only she would know the answers to. There was no response. Max waited, believing the text that had promised his mother would come and get him, but she never did. Cari never showed up. Thanksgiving came and went, and so did her birthday, along with Max's. In December 2012, Nancy's husband, Dennis, passed away, but Cari was absent from the funeral. For Nancy, it was unimaginable that Cari would miss such an important family event. Her absence only deepened her conviction that something was terribly wrong. By January 2013, Dave spotted Cari's Ford Explorer parked in a lot near his apartment. He recognized it right away. It had been in his shop for repairs. He took a photo of the license plate and sent it to the Omaha police. When they searched the vehicle, they found only one fingerprint on a mint container inside. It didn't match Cari's or anyone in the FBI's national database at the time. Months later, police finally downloaded the contents of phones belonging to Dave and Liz. However, due to mishandling, the data was never properly analyzed. The critical evidence remained untouched for years, leaving the case unresolved. If the data had been thoroughly examined when it was first retrieved, the investigation might have reached a resolution much sooner. Meanwhile, the harassment campaign continued to escalate. Dave was forced to change his phone number multiple times, but the threatening messages kept coming. Undeterred by his efforts to block them, Dave was nearing the brink of a nervous breakdown. He described the constant fear and anxiety he felt, unable to relax or let his guard down. He was always looking over his shoulder, paralyzed by the frightening messages that continued to pour in. These messages contained specific threats against his children and disturbing details about his life that left him terrified. Liz, too, was receiving messages that were supposedly from Cari. In August 2013, Liz's house was set on fire, killing all 4 of her pets: 2 dogs, a cat, and a snake. The messages that followed claimed responsibility for the fire, with emails purportedly sent from Cari. Shortly after, Dave's gun was stolen from his apartment. In January 2014, things took a darker turn when a brick was thrown through Dave's apartment window while he was with another woman. The harassment extended to Amy Flora, Dave's ex-girlfriend and the mother of his children. She, too, began receiving threatening messages. By this point, years had passed, and the harassment had escalated into a relentless campaign. Over the course of the torment, there were 15,000 emails and between 25,000 and 50,000 text messages, a full-time job of 40 to 50 hours a week spent terrorizing those involved. Around 20 to 30 fake email accounts, all using variations of Cari's name, were created. In total, more than 60 email accounts were involved in the campaign. Despite the overwhelming evidence of a targeted harassment campaign, the case was eventually relegated to the cold case shelf. Cari Farver had been missing for over 2 years by that point, with no activity in her bank accounts, no transactions, no withdrawals, nothing. The case became a missing person file with no active investigation. Meanwhile, Cari's reputation in her small town of Macedonia was being destroyed. The community began to believe she was a dangerous stalker who had abandoned her son, further complicating the investigation and her family's search for the truth. The gossip and judgment surrounding Cari's disappearance lingered for years, casting a dark shadow over her family. Nancy continued to receive strange and cryptic messages from social media accounts that were supposedly her daughters, telling her not to look for Cari. The family endured holiday after holiday without any word from Cari. Despite the years that passed, Nancy never gave up hope, though with each passing month, it became harder and harder to believe they would ever see her again. For Dave, life had become unbearable. The constant harassment had taken its toll. The messages never stopped, always threatening and invasive, as though someone was constantly watching him. He had gained 30 pounds, and the stress had driven him to drink heavily every night just to cope. Liz, who he continued to see on and off, was always present, seemingly supportive, yet receiving messages herself from the person they all believed was Cari. The pressure was relentless, and it seemed like there was no way out. In the spring of 2015, 2 officers from the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office, Sergeant Jim Doty and Deputy Ryan Avis, decided to reopen the cold case. It had been on their minds for a while. They would occasionally discuss Cari's disappearance in the office, something about the case nagging at them. They approached it from different angles. Deputy Avis focused on proving that Cari was still alive, while Sergeant Doty worked to gather evidence that would suggest otherwise. It didn't take long for Avis to recognize a crucial point: adults simply don't vanish and live without spending money. The lack of any financial activity, any sign of life from Cari's bank accounts or other records, didn't add up. It was an unusual situation, one that didn't fit the typical pattern of someone voluntarily disappearing. Sergeant Doty pointed out that Cari's bank accounts had been completely dormant for over 2 years, providing a chilling clue that something was deeply wrong. In May 2015, investigators finally interviewed Nancy Rainey, and she became the first authority figure to validate her concerns. Nancy handed over key evidence: a photograph of a $5,000 check allegedly written by Cari for furniture. The check, however, was signed by Shanna Golia, not Cari. This was the first concrete link between the 2 women, who had been believed to be strangers. It was then that the investigators brought in Special Deputy Anthony Carver, the digital forensics administrator for the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office. Carver had initially volunteered for the position, earning just $1 per year, before being hired full-time. Over the course of the investigation, he would dedicate approximately 3,000 hours to the case, even postponing his own brain surgery to continue working on it. Carver started by analyzing the phone data from 2013 that had never been properly examined. Almost immediately, he made an important discovery. Tony was able to point out that Liz was posing as Cari. Sergeant Doty would later explain. However, while this revelation was significant, it still didn't provide answers about what had happened to Cari or where she might be. From 2012 to 2015, Liz had done an exceptional job of concealing her electronic footprint. Carver noted that by the time they reopened the case, Liz had become more skilled at hiding her trail. For example, she had been using a website that allowed her to send emails and text messages on specific days and times when she was with Dave, effectively masking her true whereabouts and actions. The complexity of the situation was becoming clearer, but the mystery surrounding Cari's disappearance remained unresolved. As the investigation continued, both Dave and Liz were receiving messages from Cari's phone at the same time, but neither suspected that the woman sitting beside Dave was the one sending them. Meanwhile, Carver discovered that Liz had set up over 24 fake email addresses, all based on variations of Cari's name. He also uncovered photos on Liz's phone that were taken about a month before the police had recovered Cari's vehicle, indicating that Liz knew the car's location before law enforcement did. To process the massive amount of data, Carver developed custom software to analyze the terabytes of information. He meticulously scanned metadata and deleted files with painstaking precision. Being able to trace an IP address to a place Liz was actually laying her head was like finding the proverbial needle in a haystack, Carver later explained. But he did it. His work led to the discovery that thousands of threatening emails had been traced directly back to Liz's residences, including the house that had been burned down. In a breakthrough moment, investigators were able to match the mysterious fingerprint found inside Cari's car in 2013 to Liz Golia. On December 4th, 2015, Liz walked into the sheriff's office on her own. She filed a harassment complaint against Amy Flora, Dave's ex-girlfriend, and voluntarily allowed investigators to download the contents of her phone. This was the second time they had done this, but this time, they knew exactly what they were looking for. The investigation was finally closing in on the truth. The following day, Liz shot herself in the thigh at Big Lake Park. She claimed that Dave's stolen 9mm Smith & Wesson had been used by Amy Flora to attack her. The timing of her story was suspiciously convenient, as she had just reported the gun as missing the day before. While the police initially suspected it might have been a self-inflicted wound, the investigators chose to pretend they believed Liz's version of events. They asked her to help them gather incriminating evidence against Flora. Liz, likely eager to shift the focus from herself, took the bait. From December 2015 through 2016, Liz sent 13 emails that were supposedly from Amy Flora, each one confessing to the murder of Cari Farver. The emails contained chilling details that only the killer would know. They described Cari being stabbed 3 or 4 times in her own vehicle, how her body was wrapped and burned, and how it had been disposed of in trash bags. Most telling of all, the emails referenced a yin-yang tattoo on Cari's left hip, a detail that had never been publicly disclosed. This was a matching tattoo Cari had gotten with her ex-husband in 2009. Only someone who had seen Cari's body would know about the tattoo. The investigators traced all 13 confession emails back to Liz's devices. With this crucial evidence in hand, they now had enough to arrest Liz. However, there was still one major obstacle. There was no body. The search for Cari Farver's remains continued, even as the evidence against Liz mounted. Despite the mounting evidence, the investigators still didn't have the smoking gun that would definitively tie Liz to Cari's disappearance. In 2016, Dave remembered something crucial. He had an old tablet, one he'd owned since 2012, which Liz had had access to during their relationship. He provided the tablet to the investigators, hoping it might contain something useful. In February 2017, Carver painstakingly sifted through thousands of deleted thumbnails on a micro SD card found in the tablet. The card had also been in Liz's phone around the time of Cari's disappearance. After hours of searching, Carver found the breakthrough evidence: a photo of a dead person's foot. At the top of the foot was a tattoo, a Chinese character. Nancy Rainey, Cari's mother, confirmed that it was the exact same tattoo Cari had on her left foot, the symbol for mother. A medical examiner confirmed that the foot belonged to a deceased person, providing another grim piece of evidence. But there was more. Carver also found a photo of a dead person's thigh, which made him realize the horrifying truth. Liz Golia had killed Cari Farver and was taking photos of her lifeless body. Carver later reflected on the disturbing nature of these images. "It made me realize that Liz Golia killed Cari Farver, and she's taking photos of her body," he said. Prosecutors would later describe these images as trophy pictures, noting that they memorialized heinous acts as if they were some twisted accomplishment. The horror of what had occurred was now undeniable, and Liz's role in Cari's death was clear. The investigators then conducted a third search of Cari's vehicle, this time removing the seat fabric entirely. They discovered blood soaked into the passenger seat foam. DNA analysis revealed the chances of the blood belonging to anyone other than Cari were 1 × 100 billion. This was the smoking gun they had been waiting for. On the 22nd of December 2016, more than 4 years after Cari's murder, Liz Golia was arrested at her home in Persia, Iowa. She was charged with first-degree murder and second-degree arson. Her bail was set at a staggering $5 million. 1 month later, Liz waived her right to a jury trial. Her defense attorney later explained this decision, saying, "We waived the jury trial to move it up so I could try this case hopefully before they'd find a body." He described it as a calculated gamble that would backfire dramatically. The trial began on the 10th of May, 2017, and lasted for 10 days. Anthony Carver testified for 3 days on the digital forensics evidence. Dave Kruger took the stand, reading a fraction of the 12,000 emails he had received. Nancy Rainey testified about her daughter's tattoos and the strange messages she had received. The defense called no witnesses, instead focusing on the absence of a body, weapon, and eyewitnesses. However, the prosecution had built an overwhelming case. Prosecutor Brenda Beadle argued, "She spent years tormenting many lives, spinning a web of deception to keep Cari alive so she wouldn't get caught." On the 24th of May 2017, just 14 days later, Judge Timothy Burns delivered his verdict at 9 a.m. He declared that Cari Farver had not voluntarily disappeared and dropped off the face of the earth, marking the end of a long and harrowing journey for those who had been affected by Liz Golia's cruel actions. The judge delivered the verdict with great sadness, stating, "She was murdered. The court finds beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant intentionally killed Cari Farver with deliberate and premeditated malice." Liz Golia was found guilty on both counts, first-degree murder and second-degree arson. The courtroom erupted in cheers and applause. Nancy Rainey, Cari's mother, burst into tears of relief. "She's got her name back," Nancy said, her voice shaking. "It's not tarnished. She loved life. I just wish she could have had more of it." Liz Golia was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 18 to 20 years for arson. Despite the conviction, Cari's body was never recovered, and her final resting place remained unknown. Cari's son, Maxwell Farber, went on to graduate from Iowa State University in 2021 with a degree in software engineering. He now works as an application developer, honoring his mother's legacy in technology. In May 2019, the 3 investigators who worked tirelessly on Cari's case established the Cari Farver Memorial Scholarship Fund. This fund, which provides annual scholarships of $2,000, supports students pursuing careers in information technology at Iowa Western Community College. For nearly 4 years, the world believed Cari Farver was a dangerous stalker, a reputation she did not deserve. The truth, however, was far different. As Nancy Rainey said, "She's got her name back, and her legacy lives on." Cari's life, though tragically cut short, is now remembered for the love she had for her family and her passion for technology.